Hello everyone, I'm excited to announce the new update for the Spline Mesh tool, and with this update, it is being renamed to the all-in-one Spline Mesh tool. It was previously named the basic Spline Mesh tool, and that made sense when you could put one mesh along a spline repeatedly, but now, you can put multiple different meshes along the spline and in any order. It can have randomized locations, rotations, and scales. It can travel along other splines. It can deform the meshes along the spline or use performance-saving instancing techniques for place meshes. You can now even animate the meshes along the spline. After all this, the blueprint remains free to download using this link on the Fab page. A lot of different YouTube videos will show you how to make aspects of a tool like this, but I built this from the ground up so it supports all the features you would need, all as a single blueprint. If you're able to spend a bit of money to support the development of this tool, you can buy it on the Fab page for $5 or $20 if you're feeling more generous. Any amount will help fund future updates for tools like this and continue our support page on Discord, which you can join with the link in the description of this video. If you buy it on Fab, you'll also get the demo map you see in this video to follow along and see the different features hands-on. A big thank you to those who have already purchased. You made this update possible. Every day for the next 4 days, I'm going to be posting different videos about this update. But today's video will be covering the general topics and things that won't be discussed by those other videos. The miscellaneous stuff. The big new concepts will get their own videos, like the spline twisting method, the different mesh types that can be placed along the spline and when to use them, animating meshes along the spline, and solving some issues that I think people may have with the animation system since the engine has some quirks that may require project settings to be changed and things like that. To cover the more general stuff now, this update has changed the menu order a little bit, but most variables in previous versions are still here, but may be rearranged in the tabs they were already in. Let's just talk about the new features as they appear in the list. The first things that are new are the new commands at the top of the default options tab. The first one is reset pivot, and what it does is reset the pivot of the spline to be at the first spline point. A lot of people click into their spline and move the 2 points around, and after some time, they're nowhere near the scene root. So when they try to do something like moving or rotating the spline, it's moving and rotating at this point that's far away. But now when we hit this button, we'll see that the pivot point, or the scene root, is moved back to the spline, and now moving and rotating is easy again. The next one is reset tangents, and it will revert back any changes you made to the tangents to how UE5 would have it by default. That's it for the command, so let's move into variables. As you may know, you can have an array of meshes along your spline, and have variations of your mesh and specify which variation by using the variable override mesh IDs along spline. If your variation is just a change of the material, you can now override the mesh's material in this variable called material override. This is a bit complicated, but hopefully this demo will clear it up. For some background, meshes can have what are called material slots, which is just a way to divide the mesh into having materials that only affect certain areas. The first option you can do with this variable is to override all the material slots on the mesh by just putting the ID of the mesh whose material you want overridden with a colon. If you want a specific material slot overridden, specify the mesh ID followed by a colon like before, and then enter the name of the material slot. You can find the names by double-clicking the mesh and looking at them here. So if I just wanted to overwrite top track, I can type that in, and just like that, it only affects that part of the mesh. There's also the option underneath here to just have it override per instance, meaning that the 0 will no longer override every occurrence of the mesh ID of 0, it will only overwrite the 0th mesh. There's a lot of flexibility here, and hopefully this will save you some time from not having to keep adding meshes with slightly different materials to the array. Moving down to the next variable, we have mesh transform. And what we did was combine all the previous location offsets, rotations, and scaling options into one collapsible option. There is one big note here, and that is that all the transform data is relative to the position along the spline. If you want something that isn't relative, use the blueprint transform up above, and be sure not to confuse them because I know I have a couple of times. To avoid confusion, I like to collapse this option when I don't use it. But to show what a relative transform looks like, let's use this spline that shows static mesh components in a snake-like pattern. You can have an additional X location offset, which won't actually move it along the red axis that you see here along the gizmo. The X-axis in this context refers to the forward movement at each mesh along the spline. each mesh has a different forward path or forward vector, and so they kind of branch off as they increase in x offset. All these can be set to negative as well to go in the opposite direction. The y-axis moves it to the relative right side, and z moves it to the relative up direction. And unless you have some rotation variables enabled in your spline, relative up is usually the same as the z-axis you see on the gizmo. So that explains relative movement, but what about relative rotation? Let's demonstrate it for each axis again. We got the x value rotating it along the forward axis, which is rolling it, and just to show how it matches other UE5 behavior, I'm going to add the same mesh and show the rotation gizmo and replicate what I'm doing. So Y rotation rotates it this way by adjusting the pitch. And one note here is that at least in UE5.1, which is what I'm using right now, rotation on the Y-axis is kind of messed up when using sliders, so inputting your value directly may be better. And lastly, Z rotation rotates it this way, or what is referred to as the yaw. Finally, the scale is pretty similar in how it works. X is forward scaling, Y is sideways scaling, and Z is vertical scaling. And then next is a small change. We renamed Disable Ground Snapping to Snap Meshes to Ground, just for clarity's sake. By default, it does snap your meshes to ground, but if you ever wanted this to be off by default, just go into the blueprint and change the default. I assume most people are going to use this blueprint for sidewalks, fences, and other things along the ground, so that's why it's enabled by default. The next option is the start and end offset, and now it's combined into one variable to save menu space. So the first one is the start offset, and the second one is the end offset. We have now also fully supported gaps and deformed meshes using the gap/overlap variable. A positive value will make the meshes space themselves out, and negative values will make them overlap. This used to be called overlap, but now it officially works both ways. Scrolling down to the next option, we have the curve scaler, and it works a bit differently now. It's no longer a one-time scale edit, but now it dynamically adjusts the tangents of the spline, amplifying or reducing what UE5 has it by default. If you leave it as a scale of 1, it will do nothing. If you want to initially change the tangents and then make small tweaks, you can set it to your desired scale and then back to 1. If you want it to return to the default again, we have the Reset Tangent button I mentioned earlier. On the subject of tangents, we have a brand new tangent method for Unreal splines. Chordal tangents are something I originally implemented for the Dynamic Road System pack that I'm also working on an update for, but basically, the default tangents Unreal provides have the same magnitude tangent entering and leaving each individual spline point, which can be frustrating to work with in specific scenarios. I don't want to make this too technical, so let's look at this wire example to demonstrate. We have 4 points on this wire, 2 far away and 2 close together. The ones that are close together are making this loop here because the segments before each of these points are really long, and that's making these loops, despite there being a way to connect these 2 points in a less complicated way. Let's look at the chordal tangent version. It has the same spline point distances, but somehow finds a way to connect these 2 points without that weird loop. This is because it separates the magnitudes of the arrive and leave tangents and bases it on the segment length it's facing. I'm really curious why this isn't the default behavior. It would have the same performance if it was implemented in C++. By default, this variable is off, and if you want to turn it on or off, you'll need to toggle it and then press the Reset Tangents button. Most people won't notice the difference of this variable, but for me, I needed this because I was creating roads with splines, and it was very common to have long segments of roads followed by 2 close points, which would make really bad geometry, and in the early days would crash the editor from the geometry being invalid. That's why in the road system, tangents weren't allowed to be edited, because I was forcing it to use this chordal tangent system instead. But that's the gist for chordal tangents. Alright, now I'm going to skip over default spline twisting, because that will get its own video. But you can look forward to some of the results you are seeing now from the footage of that future video. The next option is additional roll-it spline points. This is a slightly different way to rotate meshes along the spline that allows for more precise rotation by just typing how much you want your meshes to rotate and at which spline point. The previous method relied on some Unreal Engine made variables to keep track of rotation, but they only allowed for 180 degrees of rotation in either direction. So this new method gets around that and allows you to twist your meshes as much as you like. Now onto an easy new variable, cast shadows. It either allows all meshes to cast a shadow or not. We also moved a lot of variables from the default section to the advanced section. This includes lesser used variables such as line trace distance, which allows you to specify how far the blueprint will trace for the ground above it and below it. Also here is a new debug option that visualizes your traces to see how far the previous variable can snap to. And one that's not new, but now put here, is another line trace option that only traces for certain types of objects. I was thinking of taking this one out, but a user on Discord recently asked for a way to trace for just the landscape, and this variable helped them because you could define a new trace channel for landscapes in the project settings, and then pick it here. So that kind of proved that this needs to stay, but since it won't be used as much, it will stay in the advanced section. Next is the output timer message, and what this does is print out the time it takes for your meshes to generate on the spline in the background. I use this for some benchmarking, and if you watch some of the other videos I'm putting out this week, it will be used there. The last thing in this advanced section is report ending positions, and it will be explained in detail in the animation video. But basically, it reports back the transform of each mesh after being animated so that it can resume from those positions after the level simulation ends. While we are on the subject of animation, I'll be skipping this whole tab for now. There are a lot of options here and it will be getting its own video. Originally, I wanted this tab placed below the periodic placement and randomization tab, but Unreal has a bug in all versions I've tested that shuffles your tabs if too many of them include buttons or use certain C++ classes. So that's fun, and it means that the animation tab will stay here because I have no idea what Unreal would put here instead. Going on down into the periodic placement tab, the next option is one that previously existed but got upgraded, and that is the override mesh with BP option. What this allows you to do is replace the mesh of a certain ID with a blueprint instead. It used to replace every object with the same blueprint, but now you can find the ID of the mesh you want to replace from the Spline meshes array and enter the ID number of that mesh as the first option and the corresponding blueprint you want it to replace as the second. Remember that you will have to press spawn objects in order for it to take effect. There's one hidden feature to this as well that I've been asked about a lot, and that is spawning in decals. Since we can spawn in blueprints, we can spawn in a decal that is in a blueprint. This could be used as footsteps as seen here, where I have the left foot as one spline and the right foot as the other. Or you can animate them like this arrow path. The one thing we cannot do yet is deform a decal along a spline. That's the type of operation that would probably need C++ to achieve. And as you all know by now, the goal of this tool is to fit everything into one blueprint. But anyway, let's get back to some of the other options. Another option in this tab is the new HISM option for having hierarchical instance static meshes, but mesh instances will have their own video coming as well. In the randomization tab, we have a new option for scale change per instance, and what this allows you to do is exponentially scale objects to get smaller or larger over each instance like this domino chain. And lastly, we have more options for snapping splines to other splines. One of the new options is the ability to remove intersecting points that come from concave geometry. This is really helpful to make geometry appear normal on these concave paths. When making the Snap Spline to Other Spline tab, one thing that bothered me on the initial release was that you had to use a high number of quality subdivisions to match the original curvature of the other spline. Quality subdivisions did a really good job but left you with a large number of spline points, which makes it very hard to edit or make changes. So I created some code that makes approximations using the original amount of spline points, and it works pretty well. We enable Simplify Offset Spline, and we can adjust the simplified curvature approximation to fit our needs. All that variable does is amplify or reduce the tangent magnitudes to make it more or less curvy. Quality subdivisions still affect the simplify method, so if you want better approximations, keep the quality subdivisions as high as necessary until you don't notice any change. An important note is that the fix intersections variable can wipe out an entire original spline point, leaving you with a spline that is too simplified that it no longer resembles the original. So, a warning on that. But otherwise, that is the gist of all these new features and changes. Other than that, we will have more videos posted about this update every day for the next 4 days as we cover other big additions to this update. You can follow us here on YouTube, or if you need help or want to make suggestions, we have a public Discord you can join down in the description. Thanks for watching. Until next time.